The autumn of 1888 was a season of peculiar stillness. A thick, cloying fog had descended upon London, muffling the city's ceaseless clamour and wrapping its grimy streets in a shroud of grey. Within the warm confines of our lodgings, at 221 B. Baker Street, the world outside seemed a distant, spectral thing. The rhythmic clatter of horse-drawn carriages on the cobbled stones below was softened to a dull, ghostly percussion. Even the shrill cries of the newsboys, hawking the evening paper, were swallowed by the dense air before they could properly reach our second-floor window. I sat by the hearth, a book resting unread upon my knee, observing my friend Mr. Sherlock Holmes. The fire cast a flickering amber glow upon the familiar chaos of our sitting room. The shelves were crammed with dusty volumes. The mantelpiece was littered with unanswered correspondence, and a formidable jackknife was stabbed through the center of it all, pinning a sheaf of papers to the wooden board. In one corner, a chemistry bench stood in a state of perpetual disarray, its glass beakers and retorts bearing the stains of 100 experiments. It was a room that reflected the man who inhabited it, a place of organized chaos, where profound intellect and bohemian untidiness coexisted in a strange yet perfect harmony. Holmes himself was a study in restless energy. He had been pacing the floor for the better part of an hour, his hands clasped behind his back, his head bowed in thought. The worn Persian rug, already frayed from his incessant perambulations, seemed to groan under the weight of his intellectual agitation. His tall, gaunt frame moved with a feline grace, a predator confined to a cage of his own making. The air around him crackled with an unspoken energy, a mind so fiercely active that it could not bear the quiet burden of inactivity. I knew the signs well. The city was in a lull, the criminal underworld momentarily dormant. And Holmes was suffering from the acute torment of a brain without a problem to solve. "Watson, you are a man of medicine," he said suddenly, his voice cutting through the quiet hum of the fire. He stopped his pacing and fixed me with his sharp, penetrating gaze. His eyes, usually so bright and alert, were clouded with a profound ennui. "Tell me, what is the prescribed remedy for a mind in absolute stagnation, when the faculties are sharp, but the world offers nothing upon which to sharpen them?" I smiled, setting my book aside. "I should think a period of rest would be most beneficial, Holmes. Perhaps a holiday in the countryside, away from the smoke and grime of London." He scoffed, a dry, humorless sound. "Rest? Rest is for the weary, Watson, not the idle. My mind is a racing engine, tearing itself apart, because it is not connected to the work for which it was built. To leave London now would be to abandon my post. A general might as well go on holiday in the midst of a war." "But there is no war, Holmes," I countered gently. "The papers are filled with nothing but dreary political debates and society gossip. It has been weeks since we have had a case of any real interest." "Precisely," he exclaimed, resuming his relentless pacing. "The criminal classes have become deplorably dull. There is no artistry, no imagination in their endeavors. A simple smash and grab, a clumsy forgery, a domestic squabble ending in predictable violence. It is the curse of the master craftsman to be surrounded by amateurs. My talents are being wasted on a world that has forgotten the meaning of a truly great crime." He picked up his violin from its resting place in the corner and drew the bow across the strings, producing a long, mournful note that seemed to echo the melancholy of the fog-bound city. He was not playing a tune, but rather thinking aloud through the instrument, his thoughts translated into a series of discordant, yet strangely compelling sounds. I watched him, a mixture of admiration and concern filling my heart. It was in these moments of intense boredom that Holmes was at his most vulnerable, his powerful mind turning inward, sometimes toward darker, more destructive habits. It was at that precise moment, as the last sorrowful note of the violin faded into the silence, that we heard the sound of footsteps ascending our staircase. They were heavy, deliberate steps, not the familiar tread of our landlady, Mrs. Hudson. A moment later, a firm knock echoed on our door. Holmes placed his violin down, his eyes suddenly bright with interest. "At last," he murmured, a flicker of his old energy returning. "A visitor. On a night like this, it is unlikely to be a social call. The game, perhaps, is about to begin." I rose and opened the door to find a man standing on the landing, his form silhouetted against the dim gaslight of the hallway. He was a large, burly fellow, dressed in the livery of a private courier service. He held a square, cream-colored envelope in his hand, its edges sealed with a splash of dark red wax. He looked from me to Holmes, his expression one of professional indifference. "A letter for Mr. Sherlock Holmes," he said, his voice a low rumble. "To be delivered into his hands, and his hands only." Holmes stepped forward, his languor completely vanished, replaced by an air of keen anticipation. "I am he," he said, taking the envelope. He turned it over in his long, slender fingers, his eyes scanning every detail with an intensity that could make the most trivial object seem like a priceless artifact. The courier grunted in acknowledgement, turned on his heel and descended the stairs, his heavy boots thudding a final rhythmic tattoo before the front door clicked shut, leaving us once more in the quiet solitude of our rooms. Holmes moved to the table, placing the letter beneath the bright, steady glow of the oil lamp. He did not open it immediately. Instead, he subjected the envelope to a rigorous, almost microscopic examination. He sniffed the wax seal, studied the texture of the paper, and held it up to the light, his brow furrowed in concentration. I watched him, fascinated as always by this ritual. To me, it was merely a letter. To Holmes, it was a repository of secrets, a story waiting to be read before the first word had even been seen. "What do you make of it, Watson?" he asked, without looking up. "It appears to be a formal invitation of some sort," I ventured. "The paper is of a fine quality, and the seal suggests a sender of some means, perhaps a wealthy client in need of your services." "Astute, my dear Watson," he said, a hint of amusement in his voice. "But we can do better than that. Observe. The paper is of French origin, thick and creamy, with a distinctive watermark. It is the sort of stationery one purchases from a high-end Bond Street stationer, but it has been in storage for some time. See how the edges are ever so slightly yellowed. Our sender is a person of wealth, certainly, but perhaps one whose fortune has seen better days. They value quality, but they are not prone to frivolous modern expenses." He pointed a long, thin finger at the wax seal. "The wax is of a deep crimson, almost the color of dried blood. The impression is that of a family crest. a rather elaborate one featuring a bird of prey clutching a flower. However, the seal was applied with a trembling hand. See how the edges are uneven, the impression slightly blurred. This suggests a state of extreme agitation, perhaps even fear. Our sender is in a state of great distress. He finally took up the letter opener and slit the envelope with a swift, precise movement. He unfolded the single sheet of paper within and read the contents, his expression unreadable. After a moment, he handed the letter to me. The handwriting was elegant, yet erratic, the strokes of the pen varying in pressure, further evidence of the sender's troubled mind. The message itself was brief and maddeningly vague. It read, "To Mr. Sherlock Holmes. I find myself in a situation of the most dire and urgent nature. The matter is one of extreme delicacy, and I cannot commit the details to paper. I implore you to come to my home, Blackwood Manor, in the countryside of Sussex, where I may explain the circumstances in full. Your discretion is paramount. A carriage will be waiting for you at the Blackwood station upon the arrival of the last train from London tomorrow evening. Do not fail me. My very life and the lives of others may depend upon it." The letter was unsigned. I looked up at Holmes, my mind reeling with questions. Blackwood Manor. The name is unfamiliar to me, and the message, it is so cryptic. It could be a hoax, Holmes. A wild goose chase designed to make a fool of you. "Perhaps," he said, his eyes gleaming with a renewed fire. "But I think not. The evidence of genuine distress is too strong. The trembling hand, the desperate tone. This is no practical joke, Watson. This is a cry for help from a soul in torment. And it is precisely the sort of intellectual puzzle that I have been craving." He began to pace again, but this time his steps were light and energetic, his entire being infused with a sense of purpose. "An unsigned letter from a distressed aristocrat in a remote country manor. A matter of utmost urgency that cannot be committed to paper. A mysterious carriage waiting at a desolate station. Watson, it is a symphony of suspense. The opening bars of a grand and terrible opera." My own feelings were more of apprehension than excitement. The letter had a chilling effect, its vagueness hinting at a darkness that lay hidden beneath the surface. But what could it be, Holmes? A threat? A blackmail attempt? A family secret that has finally come to light? "All are possibilities," he said, his voice alive with enthusiasm. "And all are infinitely more interesting than the dreary monotony of London life. We must go, Watson. We must answer this summons. Our presence is requested, and the game is afoot." His decision was made, and I knew there was no arguing with him when he was in this state. My own concerns were swept away by the force of his conviction. And so our preparations for the journey began. Holmes, in his element once more, moved about the room with a swift and focused energy. He began to assemble a small collection of items, his choices a curious reflection of his unique profession. From his chemistry bench, he selected a small, leather-bound case containing a variety of vials and chemicals, a compact laboratory for the field. He packed his most powerful magnifying glass, a tool that had revealed so many hidden truths in the past. He also took a small velvet-lined box containing a set of delicate instruments, tweezers, probes, and a scalpel for more intimate examinations of evidence. and, to my relief, he retrieved his service revolver from the drawer of his writing desk, checking the cylinder to ensure it was fully loaded before tucking it into the deep pocket of his traveling coat. "One must be prepared for all eventualities, Watson," he remarked, noticing my gaze. "A country manor may seem a place of peace and tranquility, but human nature is the same everywhere. Greed, jealousy, and hatred do not confine themselves to the city streets." While Holmes gathered his scientific apparatus, I packed a small bag with a change of clothes, my own medical kit, and a sturdy walking stick. The prospect of a journey into the unknown was beginning to stir my own sense of adventure, a feeling that had lain dormant for too long. To be at Holmes's side during an investigation was to witness the art of deduction in its highest form, a privilege that never failed to thrill me. By the next afternoon, we were seated in a first-class carriage of a train bound for Sussex, the sprawling, grimy metropolis of London giving way to the rolling green hills of the English countryside. The fog had lifted, but the sky remained a uniform, leaden grey. The landscape that flashed past our window was one of stark, autumnal beauty. The trees were skeletal, their bare branches reaching up to the sky like gnarled fingers. The fields were fallow, the earth turned over in dark, loamy furrows. It was a landscape that seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the coming of winter. The mood in our carriage was one of quiet contemplation. Holmes sat opposite me, his chin resting on his chest, his eyes closed. I knew he was not sleeping, but rather processing the scant information we had, turning it over and over in his mind, examining it from every possible angle. He was constructing a web of possibilities, a framework of hypotheses upon which to hang the facts as they would be revealed to us. I, on the other hand, found my thoughts drifting back to the mysterious letter. Who was this person who had summoned us with such urgency? What terrible secret did Blackwood Manor hold? The name itself seemed to suggest a place of shadows and gloom. I imagined a dark, brooding house surrounded by ancient trees, its windows like vacant eyes staring out over a desolate landscape, a place where secrets could fester and grow, like a poison in the soil. As the afternoon wore on, the sky grew darker, the light fading from the world. The train rattled and swayed, its rhythmic clatter a hypnotic counterpoint to the darkening scenery. We passed through small, sleepy villages, their lights just beginning to twinkle in the twilight. We saw lonely farmhouses, smoke curling from their chimneys, symbols of a life of simple, rustic peace that seemed a world away from the complex and dangerous errand upon which we were embarked. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, the train began to slow. The conductor's voice, calling out the name of our destination, echoed through the carriage. "Blackwood Station. This is Blackwood Station." Holmes opened his eyes, his expression sharp and alert. "The final act begins, Watson," he said, a grim smile playing on his lips. "Let us see what awaits us." We stepped out onto the platform and were immediately struck by the profound sense of isolation. The station was little more than a wooden shack, its paint peeling, its windows dark. A single gas lamp hissed and sputtered, casting a small, lonely circle of light in the encroaching darkness. There was no one else in sight. The train, our last link to the familiar world of London, let out a great sigh of steam and then, with a lurch and a groan, began to pull away. Its red tail lights disappearing into the blackness of the night, we were alone, The air was cold and damp, carrying the scent of wet earth and decaying leaves. A profound silence descended, broken only by the chirping of a lone cricket and the distant hoot of an owl. And then we saw it. Parked on the narrow, unpaved road that led away from the station was a carriage. It was a dark, imposing vehicle, its black paint gleaming faintly in the dim light of the station lamp. The horses, two powerful black stallions, stood perfectly still, their breath pluming in the cold air. The driver sat perched on his seat, a hunched, shadowy figure, his face obscured by the brim of his hat. He did not move, did not speak. He simply waited, a silent, ominous sentinel in the deepening gloom. It was a scene straight out of a Gothic novel, a tableau of suspense and foreboding. The unsigned letter, the remote manor, the desolate station, and now this mysterious funereal carriage. Every element seemed designed to set the nerves on edge, to create an atmosphere of palpable dread. Holmes, however, seemed unaffected. He strode toward the carriage with a confident, purposeful air, his tall frame a reassuring presence in the eerie twilight. I followed close behind, my hand instinctively gripping the cool, smooth wood of my walking stick. As we approached, the driver stirred. He tipped his hat in a gesture of acknowledgement, but still did not speak. He opened the carriage door, revealing a dark, plush interior. It was an invitation and a command. Holmes paused for a moment, his gaze sweeping over the carriage, the horses, the silent driver. He was taking it all in, every detail, every nuance, filing it away in the vast orderly archive of his mind. Then he turned to me, his eyes glinting in the darkness. "Well, Watson," he said, his voice a low, steady murmur. "Our host has sent for us. It would be impolite to keep him waiting." With that, he climbed into the carriage and disappeared into the shadows within. I hesitated for a moment, a shiver of apprehension running down my spine. Then, steeling myself, I followed him, the carriage door closing behind me with a solid, final thud, plunging us into a world of darkness and uncertainty. The game was indeed afoot, and I could not shake the feeling that we were stepping into a trap from which there might be no escape. The carriage lurched forward, its wheels crunching on the gravel road, carrying us deeper into the heart of a mystery that was as dark and as silent as the night itself.